we'll continue with the next talk. I'm happy to introduce now as the next speaker Bidisha Samantha. She is currently a researcher at Google India Research Lab. She completed her PhD at IIT Kharagpur under the supervision of Niloy Gangoy, our colleague here at the Future Lab. Bidisha, we are really very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Is this visible?
Very good, yes.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to my talk. I am Bidisha, and today I am going to present one of my work, a deep generative model for molecular graphs. This is a joint work with my collaborators from IIT Kharagpur Department of Computer Science and Department of Chemistry, Max Planck Institute for Software System Germany, and UPF Barcelona. The initial version of this work was accepted in AAAI 2019, and a detailed version of this work appeared in Journal of Machine Learning 2020. Before going to the detail of my work, let me give a brief overview of the broader objective. So, discovering new drug-like molecules are of great importance, and there is a need to discover sizable amount of candidate drug-like molecules using computerized method, machine learning methods, because otherwise it is very expensive to discover in wet labs. Once we have a sizable amount of plausible candidates, then it can go through several preclinical and clinical developments and filtration. And finally, we can get like a small fraction of the initial set, which can be actually used and of interest of a chemist. So our contribution is on the first step, that is to discover a sizable amount of candidate drug-like molecules. So in this space, there has been a lot of work where computer scientists try to use several machine learning techniques and to learn from a set of molecules useful information and generate like similar plausible molecules. These works are mainly categorized into two approaches. The first one is text-based approach, where a molecule is represented as a string, which are called SMILE strings, that has the information of all the participating atoms, at the same time how they are connected with each other. So in some way, it captures the structure of the molecule. And the second set of approaches, those are graph-based approaches, where they represent the molecules using molecular graphs. And then we develop several deep generative model to learn some informations from this graph and generate new plausible molecular graphs. However, both of these line of works has certain limitations, which actually motivates us for our work. So the text-based approaches, basically they use like a string-based representation, though that has certain structural information, but many times they do not capture structural similarities. A single molecule can have multiple representations, so learning from such representation can confuse a system. So if you learn from this representation and try to generate similar molecules, we keep on generating like the same samples. That is, there could be a lack of diversity, and the generated samples may not be a valid sample. For graph-based approaches, there are certain limitations, like many of them can generate only molecules with a given number of atoms. However, we expect like a generative model should generate a very molecules with different number of atoms. Many of them are not invariant of permutations, They generate molecular graphs sometimes by combining a small fractions or small set of graphlets. So this also sometimes lead to lack of diversities. So here our contribution is to propose a model which is based on a variational autoencoder and specific to learned graphs. So the model has two parts, a probabilistic encoder, which takes a graph as an input. Then it tries to convert the information to a continuous latent embedding space. From that embedding space, we can sample representations per node. And then using that, we can generate, using a probabilistic decoder, we can generate some structures which are similar to the original structure but may not always be the same. So our key innovation is that our encoder has aggregator functions which helps us to learn the permutation invariance property. It can be applied to variable size graphs, and we can decode like valid molecules. At the same time, we can also generate the 3D configuration of them, which is also of large use. Before going to the detail of the architecture, let me give a brief overview on the main building block which we have used here. That is a variational autoencoder. A variational autoencoder basically an encoding decoding module where the encoder takes any input, tries to convert it to a continuous representation space instead of a fixed representation. That means if it is a Gaussian representation space, it should have a mean and a standard deviation vector. You can sample a representation from this space, and then using the decoder, we can decode the original sample. And to train this kind of a model, generally we optimize this objective function. It has two parts. One is the increasing the reconstruction likelihood. That is, we try to generate back the original sample, and then the variational loss, which actually tries to capture the difference between at the approximate posterior and a prior. By approximate posterior, I mean the output of the encoder. And the prior sometimes are unknown, so we can just model it as a noise or a standard Gaussian. Now I will give you the detailed view of the encoder. So given any molecule, we first construct the molecular graph where nodes are actually the atoms and the bonds are represented as edges. And each of these nodes initially have only their information. That could be like the node identity, that which type of atom it is. It can have different chemical properties information as well. Now we first start accumulating the information for every node and its neighborhood. So we can go for k-hop encoding, where in each hop encoding we just aggregate the information of the neighboring nodes. And this aggregation function is symmetric. So other than this property aggregation, we also do a special property aggregation, that is where exactly a atom is situated with respect to their neighbors, that is their three-dimensional coordinates. And these two information together contributes to one information vector per atom or per node. Once we accumulate these informations, then our objective is to transfer them to a continuous space. Now, we use here a deep neural network, feed-forward network, where we pass these aggregated informations and it tries to encode it through our continuous representation space by generating a mean and standard deviation vector per node. And we can generate the representation per node by sampling from this distribution. So The encoder has several desirable properties. First of all, they are permutation invariants. So when for each node U, its embedding is always permutation invariant of the permutation of the node labels of its neighbors. Because at the time of generating embeddings, even though we are aggregating information from the neighbors, the aggregation function we used is symmetric, which helps us to achieve this. Then it is permutation equivariance. That is, if we permute the node labels, their embeddings also get permuted in the similar manner. And finally, all the trainable weights in that encoder, they don't depend on the number of nodes and edges. So we can train the model with graphs which are of various size. Now, once we generate the embedding, our next objective is to try to decode all the information back. So this is the main building blocks of the decoder. So we have mainly 4 blocks. First is node feature decoder, which tries to decode the features specific to each node. Then we need to also predict the possible edge numbers, then the edges, and finally the edge types. To do so, we first need to have the representation for the graph, which can be achieved using 2 ways. We can do a conditional sampling, where we can start with a graph, we pass it to our encoder, get a representation distribution, and from that distribution, we can sample a representation. Otherwise, we can first sample the possible number of nodes that we model as a Poisson distribution, and the mean is estimated from the training data. And once we have the number of nodes, we can actually generate or sample a representation from a standard Gaussian or a noise. And once we have these representations for every node, we can decode the node features. So we can pass the information to a decoder, or again, this is modeled as a deep neural network. And the output of it is categorical, because according to our design, all these node features are categorical. And from the softmax distribution, we can actually sample the node feature. So like that, we can sample like all the node features independently. And then we need to know how many edges are possible. So for that, we again use this representation and decode it through a Poisson and sample the number of edges from there. Next, once we know the number of edges, we need to decode the actual edges. So to take a decision that whether there exists an edge between a pair of nodes, we just pass it representations to our decoder, and it again generates a softmax distribution, and we sample like the edges from there. And once we know that there exists an edge, we are also interested to know what type of edge it is. That actually denotes whether it is a single bond, double bond, or triple bond that existed in the original molecule. And thus we sort of decode all the edges sequentially. That is, we start sampling by one edge, and based on whatever we sampled, we start sampling the next edge. Now, each time of sampling that involves of calculation of a softmax distribution over all possible edges, which is order of v square. And this is computationally expensive and very hard to train a deep neural network for that. So we do a negative sampling and reduce the complexity to order of E. Next, we also propose another method that is called masking, in order to make the training efficient, so that we should not generate an edge wrongly between 2 nodes whose valencies are already met. So here I have given a very simple example to demonstrate the effect of masking. Say we want to generate a triangle-free graph, and after we generated k-1 edges, we want to generate the next edge. So we keep a binary vector which keeps track that which edges are not at all possible. So here we should not predict any edge between 20 to 7 because that will make a triangle. So ultimately this binary mask, we will update it as 0 such that the model can easily learn that it should not generate any logit value here corresponding to this. So these simple restrictions, structural restrictions, can be implemented using masking. Once we generate like the structure, that is the nodes, the connectivity, the type of edges, then we are interested to also generate the coordinates. And the coordinates of a given node U also depend on its neighboring nodes coordinates. So we first aggregate the information of its one-hop neighbors, and then we pass this information to a decoder module, which decodes it to a multidimensional Gaussian, multivariate Gaussian, and we sample the 3D coordinates from here, and we can generate a graph. Now, given the structure, we can actually generate multiple 3D configurations, but we report the one which has minimum potential energy, which we calculate from this Gaussian software, because that will be the most stable structure. To train this architecture, we use the VAE elbow objective, which had two parts. One is to maximize the likelihood and another is to minimize the KL. So this likelihood actually is being dependent on the edge sequence we provide. And given a graph, there can be several edge sequences. To make the training permutation invariant, we randomize the source node, we sample multiple times a source node, and then we do a BFS and consider that as an edge sequence, and then we aggregate that learning from all of the edge sequence for a given graph, single graph. To experiment with, we use these two datasets, zinc and QM9, and for each molecule in the dataset, we construct a molecular graph where nodes that are basically atoms, edge corresponds to bonds. Node features are basically the node atom identity or node identity. And for our experiment, we restricted to only carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. And for edge types or edge weights, we restricted our experiment to single, double, and triple bonds. Now, this is one of the initial results where we can see the center one is a molecule from the training set, and we pass it through our, once training is done, we pass it through our encoder and generate the representation distribution and sample multiple representation from that and try to decode the original sample back. We can see that all the decoded ones are looking very similar to this original one, but they are not exactly same. So that shows the potential of this method, that we can generate, we can learn from a small set of molecules, and we can generate something which are similar to the original one, but not exactly the same. Now we also experiment with its effectiveness in order to see that how important the latent space are. So the leftmost column is like a molecule again from the training data, and we generate the representation. Then we part up the representation of only one atom. Here it is highlighted as green. As we go from left to right, the degree of perturbation is higher. And we also report the molecular weight and synthetic accessibility score for each of these molecules that we discover. And we can see for every row, almost the molecular weights remain same. That means that the we are generating some structure which has similar atom combination. However, the synthetic accessibility scores are getting higher as we go from left to right. This score actually denotes how easily a particular molecule can be synthesizable. This is a theoretical approach. It may not be exactly same if we run it in the lab. And higher the value means it is very difficult to synthesize. So as you go from left to right, we can see the scores are getting higher. That means higher perturbation is generating a more complex structure. To quantitatively evaluate, we actually focus on these three metrics. One is the validity, then novelty and uniqueness. The validity is actually measured by a chemoinformatic tool, RTKit, where we need to pass the generated molecule structure. It does some basic checking like the valency meets or not, aromacity could be applied or not. And if that passes the basic checkpoints, it says that this particular sample is a valid sample. And we also calculate novelty, that we just check with the training data set whether we are generating something similar to the training. And then uniqueness, that is how many unique samples we can generate. And we compare the performance with two types of methods as I discussed initially. One, the graph-based methods, and another are the text-based methods. And for validity, we got these scores. The text-based methods validity are underwhelming. And that is because even though the SMILE strings captures some structures, but they don't explicitly captures the necessary informations there. Whereas graph-based methods does that. And so many of them can generate valid molecules. In terms of novelty, all of them, the results are more or less comparable. And for uniqueness, we can see that there are these two methods, CGVA and SDVA, which are similar with us. Now, instead of just generating some structure, we are also interested to generate some molecule structure which has certain properties of interest. And we use this property, penalized log P, which is also been used in our previous literature, which is log P, synthetic accessibility and number of long cycles. Log P denotes the octanol partition coefficient and has directly association with solubility. So it is very important property for a molecule. Higher the log P value is, that means it is more fat soluble. Lower means it is soluble to water. So we are using a Bayesian optimization method for this. So we generate graph embeddings for a set of samples and we calculate the score using RTKit. And then we use this as the initial seed points and we use a sparse Gaussian process to predict the scores for new samples. And then we use Bayesian optimization to optimize the scores. So the idea is that starting with these initial seeds, we want to navigate through the embedding space towards a direction that guarantees to generate some new samples having higher score of the value of the desired property. And we can see that our method is able to generate unique molecules at the same time with very high score of our interest. So the previous approach actually shows like the importance of the embedding space and how useful that is. So here we actually develop another architecture that only focuses on generating some structure with specified property. So this we develop an decoder module which is structurally and architecturally similar to the original decoder. So whatever knowledge we gathered while training the initial model, we just copy those trained parameters to this new decoder. So this new decoder actually benefits from the inductive training of the original decoder. And then we optimize this decoder using KL control so that it can generate molecules with some value of property value of our interest. So we use this following objective. The objective has clearly two parts. The first one actually penalizes low values of the molecular property. That is, if we generate some structure whose property value is lower, then it will be penalized by this term. And the second term penalizes structural dissimilarity with the original decoder. That means how closely it is structurally similar with the original training molecules. And rho is the control parameter, which actually tries to keep the trade-off between these two. And once trained with this model, we have observed that we can generate like very high property values. We can discover new molecules with higher log P values and QED values. QED measures the drug likeliness. Higher the value, better, because that indicates it is more drug likely. And as you can see, these numbers are quite high than the first row, which we achieved using Bayesian optimization. However, just to see like how this row, the control parameter is taking care of the structure and property balance. So if we go from left to right, the value of rho is decreasing, and hence we are generating some structure similar to the training molecules. Whereas in the left, the structures are not similar. However, we are able to generate like molecules having higher property values. With this objective, we also try to discover molecules with low potential energy that actually guarantees that the generated ones, the structures are stable. So we just modify the objective. Instead of just optimizing it for the whole structure, we fix the connectivity, the edges and the edge properties, and only generate the 3D values. And this loss function indicates the single point energy, that is the potential energy of a molecule given a 3D configuration. Lower the value it is more stable. And the second part penalizes the 3D structural dissimilarity with the original decoder. So here is a result where in the left side we can see left and right, this is the same sample where the connectivity and atoms, everything are same, is only the 3D is different. So in the left side, the single point energy is higher, right side it is more negative, and hence the structure is more stable. So in conclusion, we have introduced a variational autoencoder for molecular graphs, which, thanks to several technical innovations, beats the state of the art. There are many interesting questions for future work, like the generative models of dynamic graphs would allow how they can allow us to simulate chemical synthesis, the generative model which learns to provide candidate molecules with more desirable properties. And there are other generative applications, more generic towards graph generation that could also be achieved using this model. Thank you. Now I am happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Vidisha. Let's put down the slides, turn on the videos. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, maybe I start. So first of all, thanks for the presentation. Was really nice. I like the whole approach and the concepts behind the approach. One thing which is a little bit confusing for me is that we have, on the one hand, very discrete features. So you have CHO and the features of the atoms, and then you have these strict connectivity properties, and then you learn a variational model which is very continuous. So we had something similar when we tried to learn embeddings for token-based games. So in some games like Mario, you have only tokens available and not intermediate tokens. So we really have had the challenge on how to learn appropriate representations in this latent space. And to our experience, such a continuous model performed quite bad. So you either need very strict thresholding or some other tricks to make it workable, or the data must be, let's say, well conditioned so it is really, let's say, applicable. So did you face any problems with that?
If I understand your question correctly, are you saying that the graphs are basically they are non-Euclidean kind of data and we are like mapping that to a continuous space? So after decoding, whether we're able to generate valid molecules easily? Is that
Yes.
what you are asking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think even if we transferred that non-Euclidean data to a continuous space, the magic basically happens in the decoder side because it actually tries to transform that representation using nonlinear function to what we are interested to decode at. And our experience is that once we generate like a continuous representation, we were sampling around 100 times the representation to generate a molecule and to see that whether it is valid or not. So yeah, so if we train with more and more data, the number of like sampling and decoding will reduce, and we can easily generate like more valid structures.
Okay, so it's like a rejection sampling you're doing. So if you have invalid structures, you just ignore them and then you continue sampling.
Yeah, but we always observe that it is almost guaranteed that by 100 is like maximum, we can generate some valid data always. So it depends like the data and how many data you are training.
Yeah, and maybe a final remark. So for these things that we did there in these works, we also computed measures like the Levenstein distance to get a metric about the variability and the the intrinsic properties of the structures we generated. So maybe it's interesting to look up these measures, and this is also interesting for you. It's called Levenstein distance.
Sure.
Very good. We have another question by Sonam. You can unmute yourself and ask. Maybe also turn on the video.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, great. Thanks for the wonderful lecture, and the model is really great. But there is one problem that I could face while trying to convince myself with the model is that these chemicals and molecules, they don't work individually. They work in a system, and I could not find any environmental parameters in your model. So how would you justify that?
So you are saying, if I understand your question correctly, you are trying to say that at the time of modeling, we are not considering any environmental parameter. But I think that those were important if you are interested to do retrosynthesis kind of a modeling where you start with some fragments and try to see that how they are reacting, and you start off predicting that what would be the resulting structure are. But our case is more restrictive when we have, say, some samples, and you can say that the samples are like in the stable state, like they are not reactive. And we just need to learn that what are the how they are structurally situated, and start off generating something which is also very stable. So I can see what you are saying, but we wanted to explore in the direction of retrosynthesis, and there actually we saw that we need to also consider like other environmental parameters. But for our initial work, it was not needed. So it is just learning from some structure which are chemically very stable and they are not reactive, and then trying to generate some more on that same state.
So can the results from your study be extrapolated in understanding the structural variations in the let's say the DNA structure or the chromatin structure?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we have not explored in that direction, but yeah, that is an interesting way to explore.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments? If there are no more questions, then thank you again, Bidisha, for the very interesting talk. I remember that I did a talk on something different a few months ago, and then people asked me about protein synthesis or synthesis of as you discussed, and I did not have a good answer. So next time I can refer to your work. That's really very interesting. Thank you, everybody, also for the questions and the good discussion.